HFY's eyes snapped open like broken glass. His heart hammered against his chest plate as the dream faded, leaving behind the taste of metal and fear. The regeneration pod hummed around him, its blue light casting strange shadows on the medical bay walls. 3 years had passed since the battle, but his mind still lived in those terrible moments. The medical ship Salvation's Edge floated quietly through space. Most of the crew slept during the night cycle, but HFY never slept well. Anymore. He pulled himself from the pod with shaking hands, his forearms moving like broken machinery. His reflection in the metal wall showed what he had become. Once he had been a proud warrior of the Kethmoran Empire. Now he looked like a ghost wearing armor. Another nightmare, HFY. The voice belonged to Dr. Lisa Grant, the human doctor who ran the medical bay. She stood in the doorway, holding a cup of something warm. Her hair was gray now, and lines marked her face, but her eyes remained kind. Those eyes reminded him too much of the battle. Too much of her. "I do not need your medicine," HFY said, his voice rough like grinding stone. His mandibles clicked nervously, a habit he had developed since the humans. "The dreams will pass." Dr. Grant walked closer, her steps soft on the metal floor. "You've been saying that for 3 years. The dreams aren't passing. They're getting worse." HFY turned away from her. Through the small window, stars moved slowly past. Somewhere out there was Kepler 442b, the planet where everything changed, where his fleet of 50,000 warriors met 800 human colonists and lost. Where he learned that size and strength meant nothing against the human spirit. "Tell me about the dream," Dr. Grant said, sitting on the medical chair beside him. "What do you see?" "Fire," HFY whispered. "Always fire?" And her face? "Captain Rodriguez?" The name hit him like a plasma blast. Amy Rodriguez, the human captain who should have died like all the others, who should have begged for mercy or run in fear. Instead, she had looked at him with those terrible, kind eyes and offered him water. Water when her own people were dying. Around her, she was nothing, HFY said, but his voice shook. A small human female, weak, soft. She should have died in the first attack. But she didn't. No, she did not. Dr. Grant sipped her drink. The smell reminded HFY of something the humans had called coffee. Many of the crew had started drinking it after working with humans. It was another way the species changed everything. They touched. "You were the tactical officer on the Bone Render," Dr. Grant said. "Your ship carried 12,000 Kethmoran warriors, the finest soldiers in your empire." "Yes." "And you were the only survivor." The words hung in the air like smoke. HFY felt his hands shake again. In the dreams, he could still hear the screams of his crew as their ship died around them. He could still smell the burning metal and flesh. But worst of all, he could still see Captain Rodriguez bandaging his wounds with pieces of her own uniform. The settlement was called Echo 7, Dr. Grant continued. A mining colony. Families, mostly. Children. Old people. A few ex-military, like Captain Rodriguez, but not many. "We studied them for weeks," HFY said, remembering. "Our scouts said they were weak. Primitive weapons. No real defenses. It should have been simple. What changed?" HFY closed his eyes, but that only made the memories stronger. He could see the Bone Render dropping from orbit, its weapons charged and ready. He could see the human settlement spread out below them, like a small island in an ocean of rock and dust, so small, so helpless. "We sent the surrender message," he said. "Standard procedure. We always gave them a chance to submit." "What did they say?" Captain Rodriguez answered for them. HFY's mandibles clicked rapidly. "She said, 'Come and take it.'" Dr. Grant nodded. "And then?" "Then we learned what humans really are." The memory pulled him back 3 years, to the bridge of the Bone Render. Commander Vextar had laughed when they received the human response. The bridge crew had joined in, their chittering laughter filling the air. How could such small, weak creatures think they could fight the Kethmoran Empire? We began the attack, Zexai continued. Standard orbital bombardment. We hit their power stations, their communication towers, their vehicle depots. Everything went according to plan. But they kept fighting. Every human we thought was dead got back up. Every building we destroyed became a new fortress. Every weapon we broke was replaced with something worse. Zexai remembered watching the tactical displays in confusion. The humans should have surrendered. After the first hour, their losses were massive. Their equipment was destroyed. Yet the red dots on his screen kept moving, kept fighting, kept killing his warriors. A mechanic named Bobby Chun turned mining explosives into weapons that cut through. Our armor, Zexai said. A teacher called Helen Murphy organized children to carry ammunition under plasma fire. An old man named Frank Davis held a checkpoint for 6 hours with a hunting rifle against a full Kethmoran squad. They fought for their families. No. Zexai shook his head. It was more than that. They fought like they were already dead, like death meant nothing to them. We had never seen anything like it. Dr. Grant was quiet for a moment. Is that what scares you? That they weren't afraid to die? No, Zexai whispered. What scares me is that they were afraid. I could smell their fear. I could see it in their eyes. But they fought anyway. They chose to fight when any reasonable being would have run. The medical bay fell silent, except for the hum of machinery. Zexai stared at his reflection again, seeing not the broken warrior he had become, but the proud soldier he had been. That soldier had believed the Kethmoran Empire was invincible. That soldier had thought fear was weakness and mercy was foolishness. That soldier had never met humans. The battle lasted 3 days, he said finally. 3 days of impossible things. 3 days of watching humans do what no species in the galaxy had ever done before. What was that? They made us afraid. Dr. Grant finished her coffee and stood. Up. The nightmares will keep coming until you face what really happened down there, Zexai. Until you accept what Captain Rodriguez showed you. What did she show me? That being human isn't about being strong or weak. It's about choosing to do what's right, even when it costs everything. After she left, Zexai sat alone in the medical bay, staring out at the stars. Somewhere among them was Earth, the human. Homeworld, a small blue planet that had produced the most terrifying and beautiful species the galaxy had ever known. He closed his eyes and tried not to dream. Dr. Grant found Zexai in the observation deck 2 days later. He stood at the large window, watching space drift by. His 4 arms hung at his sides like broken wings. She had seen him like this before, lost in memories that pulled him back. To that terrible battle. You didn't come to our session yesterday, she said, walking up beside him. I was thinking. About Kepler 442b? Zexai's mandibles clicked once. About how wrong we were. About everything. Dr. Grant sat in one of the chairs facing the window. Tell me about the approach, before the battle started. Zexai was quiet for a long time. When he spoke, his voice was distant, like he was seeing it all again. We came out of hyperspace in perfect formation. 50 ships. The pride of the Kethmoran Third Fleet. Commander Vextar stood on the bridge of the Bone Render like a king. You were confident we had conquered 47 species. 47 worlds that fell before our might. Some fought. Some surrendered. All were broken within days. Zexai turned from the window. The humans were species number 48. Dr. Grant nodded. What did your scouts tell you about the colony? 800 humans, mining equipment, basic shelters. A few old military vehicles from their wars. Nothing that could threaten a Kethmoran warrior. Zexhi's eyes grew darker. We had detailed reports, medical scans, population counts. We knew how many children lived there, how many old ones, how many could fight. But you didn't know who they were. No, we did not. The memory pulled him back to the bridge of the bone render. The tactical display showed Settlement Echo 7 spread across the planet's surface like scattered toys. Small buildings, dirt roads, mining vehicles parked in neat rows. It looked so peaceful, so harmless. Captain Rodriguez was loading supplies when we arrived, Zexhi said. Our long-range scanners showed her moving between the buildings, talking. To people, giving orders. She was just another human to us. Small, weak, unimportant. What was she really doing? Preparing to die. The words hit Dr. Grant like cold water. She had read the reports, but hearing it from Zexhi made it real in a way that data never could. We sent the standard surrender message, Zexhi continued. Every species receives the same offer. Submit and live. Resist and die. Simple, clean. Most choose to live. But Captain Rodriguez answered differently. She came on the communication channel herself. Her image appeared on our main screen. Zexhi closed his eyes, but he could still see her face. Human faces were strange to Kethmoran eyes, but he had learned to read them during his time with Dr. Grant. She was afraid. I could see it in her eyes. But she stood straight and spoke clearly. What did she say? Come and take it. Zexhi's voice was barely a whisper. 4 words that changed everything. Commander Vexstar had laughed when the transmission ended. The bridge crew had joined in, their chittering voices filling the air. How could such a small creature think? She could challenge the Kethmoran Empire? It was like a mouse threatening a dragon. We began the bombardment, Zexhi said. Plasma cannons targeted their power grid, their communication towers, their vehicle depot. Standard procedure. Break their ability to organize, then land troops to finish them. Did it work? The buildings exploded. The towers fell. The lights went out across the colony. Zexhi opened his eyes. We thought it was over, but it wasn't. No, it was just beginning. The first sign something was wrong came 30 minutes after the bombardment. The tactical officer reported movement in the colony. Small groups of humans moving between this ruins. They should have been running in panic or hiding in shelters. Instead, they were moving with purpose. Captain Rodriguez's voice came over our communication system, Zexhi said. She had rebuilt their transmitter using parts from mining. Equipment. Her message was simple. Is that all you've got? Dr. Grant felt a chill run down her spine. She was taunting you. She was showing us that humans do not break easily. The first wave of Kethmoran troops landed an hour later. 500 warriors in full combat armor, weapons charged, and ready? They expected to find frightened civilians hiding in the wreckage. Instead, they found something impossible. The humans had turned the ruins into a fortress, Zexhi said. Every broken building became a firing position. Every pile of rubble hid weapons. Bobby Chun, the mechanic, had wired mining charges throughout the landing zone. They were ready. For you, more than ready. They were hunting us. The battle that followed broke every rule of warfare the Kethmoran knew. Humans appeared from nowhere, struck hard, then vanished into the ruins. They used weapons that should not have worked. Against Kethmoran armor, they fought in ways that made no tactical sense. A teacher named Helen Murphy led a group of children, Zexhi said. They crawled through drainage pipes to deliver ammunition to fighters pinned down by our troops. Plasma bolts burned the air above their heads, but they kept moving. Children. In combat, human children, different from any young we had seen. They did not cry or run. They helped their adults fight. HFY's voice shook. An 8-year-old boy named Tommy Blake carried explosives to our landing craft. He died placing the charges, but he took 20 warriors with him. Dr. Grant closed. Her eyes. She had read about Tommy Blake in the reports. The boy had volunteered for the mission, knowing he would not come back. We sent more troops, HFY continued. 1,000 warriors. Then 2,000. Each wave was supposed to break the human resistance. Each wave was destroyed or driven back. How? Captain Rodriguez and her people fought like they were already dead. Like death meant nothing to them. But worse than that, they fought smart. They knew our tactics, our weapons, our weaknesses. How did they know? Rodriguez had been a cargo pilot in human military service. She had studied alien weapon systems, alien tactics. When we came to her colony, she was ready. The second day of battle had been worse than the first. The humans began using psychological warfare, something the Kethmoran had never encountered. They would leave Kethmoran bodies in specific patterns, arranged to send messages. They captured communication equipment and whispered threats in broken Kethmoran language. They got inside our heads, HFY said. Our warriors began to fear the darkness, began to jump at shadows. We had energy shields and plasma weapons, but the humans made us afraid to use them. How? They turned every advantage we had against. U.S. When we used our shields, they trapped us and used explosives. When we used heavy weapons, they hid among their own civilians, making us choose between victory and honor. Dr. Grant was quiet for a moment. What happened to the civilians? The non-combatants? That was the strangest part, HFY said. We expected them to evacuate or surrender separately. Instead, they chose to stay and fight beside their warriors. Old people, children, families, all chose to die together rather than live apart. They were protecting each other. No, they were protecting something more important than their lives. The third day had begun with a message from Captain Rodriguez. Her voice, tired but unbroken, reached every Kethmoran ship in orbit. You came here to conquer us, to make us slaves. But we choose how this ends. We choose how we die. That was when HFY realized the humans had never intended to survive the battle. They had intended to make the Kethmoran pay such a terrible price that no alien species would ever again think humans were easy prey. She was teaching us, HFY whispered. Captain Rodriguez was teaching the entire galaxy what it meant to. Fight humans. Dr. Grant stood up and walked to the window. Outside, the stars looked cold and distant. Is that when you understood? No, I understood later, when she saved my life. The memory hit him like a physical blow. Captain Rodriguez, dying in the wreckage of her colony, using her last strength to bandage the wounds of an enemy who had come to destroy everything she loved. That was when I learned what humans really are, HFY said. Not the monsters we expected. Something far more terrifying. What's that? Heroes. The third day of battle began with silence. HFY remembered standing on the bridge of the Bone Render, watching the tactical displays show fewer and fewer red dots moving across the colony. Only 200 humans remained alive. After 3 days of impossible resistance, the end seemed near. We should have known, HFY told Dr. Grant as they sat in the medical bay. The silence was not surrender. It was preparation. Double quotes, Dr. Grant poured herself another cup of coffee. The smell always reminded HFY of that final day, though he could not say why. What were they preparing for? The last lesson. Commander Vextar had been confident that morning. The human resistance was broken. Their weapons were nearly exhausted. Their fighters were trapped in the underground mining complex with no way out. It was time to finish the conquest and move on to the next world. We surrounded the mining facility, Zexai said. 3,000 warriors in full battle armor. Energy shields at maximum power. Heavy plasma cannons aimed at every entrance. There was no escape for the humans. But they didn't try to escape. No, they did something else. Something that changed everything. The memory pulled him back to the surface of Kepler 442b. The colony lay in ruins around the mining complex. Smoke still rising from the wreckage of buildings and vehicles. The air tasted of burned metal and death. Kethmoran warriors surrounded the facility in perfect formation, waiting for the order to attack. Captain Rodriguez sent one final message, Zexai said. Her voice was tired, but still strong. She said, "You wanted to see how humans fight. Now you will see how humans die." Dr. Grant set down her coffee cup. What did she mean? We found out 30 seconds later. The explosion came from deep underground, but it was not the kind of explosion the Kethmoran expected. Instead of the sharp crack of military explosives, there was a deep rumble that seemed to come from the planet itself. The ground shook, the air filled with a strange blue light. Danny Walsh, the colony engineer, had been working for 3 days, Zexai said, not on weapons or defenses. On the fusion reactor that powered the mining equipment. He turned it into a bomb? No. Something worse. He turned it into a weapon that could reach into space. The electromagnetic pulse hit the Kethmoran fleet like an invisible fist. Every ship in orbit suddenly went dark. Life support failed. Weapons systems died. Navigation computers crashed. In one moment, the most powerful fleet in Kethmoran history became a collection of floating metal coffins. The pulse was precisely calibrated, Zexai said. Strong enough to disable our ships, but not strong enough to kill the crews immediately. Danny Walsh wanted us to survive long enough to understand what had happened. Dr. Grant felt her hands shake slightly. The humans killed themselves to stop you. All of them. Every single human in that colony chose to die rather than let us win. The bone render had been lucky. It was closer to the planet than the other ships, so it crashed instead of floating dead in space. Zexai remembered the terrible moments as the ship fell through the atmosphere, its hull screaming as it heated. Emergency systems failed one by one. The bridge crew died when the command section collapsed. I was thrown from the tactical station, Zexai said. My armor was cracked. My left arm was broken. I could smell fuel leaking from ruptured tanks. The ship was going to explode, and I could not move. How did you survive? Captain Rodriguez. The words hung in the air like smoke. Dr. Grant knew this part of the story, but she had never heard it from Zexai himself. The official reports were cold and factual. They did not capture the emotional truth of what had happened. She found me in the wreckage 2 hours after the crash, Zexai said. Half the ship was on fire. Toxic gases filled the air. She should have been dead from radiation poisoning, but she was still moving, still helping her enemy, helping anyone who needed help. That was what she did. Zexai closed his eyes and saw her again. Captain Amy Rodriguez, small and fragile by Kethmoran standards, crawling through burning wreckage to reach survivors. Her uniform was torn and bloody. Burns covered her arms and face, but her eyes were still kind. She had a medical kit, Zexai said. Basic human supplies that should not have worked on Kethmoran physiology. But she tried anyway. She wrapped my wounds with strips torn from her own clothing. She gave me water from her personal supply. Why? I asked her the same question. She was dying. Her colony was destroyed. Her people were dead. I was her enemy. Why help me? Dr. Grant leaned forward. What did she say? She said, because that is what makes us human. The simple words had hit Zexai harder than any weapon. He had spent 3 days fighting humans, watching them do impossible things, seeing them choose death over surrender. But in that moment, he finally understood what made them so terrifying. She stayed with me for 6 hours, HFY said, talking, sharing water, keeping me conscious. She told me about her life, about her family back on Earth, about why she came to Echo 7. Why did she come? To build something. She said humans always tried to build something. New homes, new families, new hope. Even when everything was destroyed, they would start building again. Captain Rodriguez had talked about her daughter, Caddy, who was studying medicine on Earth, about her husband, Paul, who had died in an accident 2 years earlier, about the colonists who had become her new family, and how they had chosen to stay and fight instead of running. She was not angry, HFY said. That was the strangest part. Her people were dead. Her world was burning. But she was not angry at me or my species. She was sad. Sad? Sad that it had come to this. Sad that we could not find another way. She said humans and Kethmoran should have been friends, not enemies. The Coalition rescue ships arrived 8 hours later. They found Captain Rodriguez sitting beside HFY, both of them barely alive. She had used the last of her medical supplies on him. She had given him the last of her water. When the rescue team reached them, she was unconscious from blood loss and radiation exposure. She died 3 days later in the Coalition medical ship, HFY said. I was in the bed next to hers. I watched her die. Dr. Grant wiped her eyes. What were her last words? She asked me to tell the galaxy about her people. Not about how they fought, but about why they fought. She said other species might face the same choice someday, and they should know that there were worse things than death. Like what? Living without honor. Living without protecting those you love. Living as a slave when you could die as a free person. The medical bay was quiet except for the hum of machinery. Outside the window, stars moved slowly past each, one representing worlds and species that lived in peace because of what happened at Echo 7. The Coalition fleet found 43 disabled Kethmoran ships, HFY said. Thousands of warriors floating helpless in space. They could have left us to die. Instead, they rescued us. Because that is what the Coalition does. Because that is what Captain Rodriguez taught them to do. HFY stood up and walked to the window. Somewhere out there was Earth, the blue world that had produced Amy Rodriguez and people like her. Somewhere out there were more humans, building new colonies, raising new families, creating new hope. I wake up screaming, he said quietly, because I dream about her kindness. I dream about what she showed me about honor and sacrifice and love. I dream about how wrong we were about everything. Dr. Grant joined him at the window. And what do you see when you look at the stars now? I see a galaxy that Captain Rodriguez saved, not just from the Kethmoran Empire, but from the darkness that lives inside all of us. She showed us there was another way to live. What way is that? Like humans, with courage when we are afraid, with kindness when we are angry, with hope when everything seems lost. HFY pressed his hand against the cool glass. She is still teaching us, even now, every day, in every choice we make. Outside, the stars burned bright and steady, lighting the way home. The Galactic Council Chamber was the largest room HFY had ever seen. Representatives from 47 species sat in curved rows that stretched up toward a domed ceiling painted with stars. Each species had fought the Kethmoran Empire, and lost. Each had been conquered and absorbed into the greater whole. Now they were free, members of the Coalition, and they were here to decide the fate of humanity. HFY stood at the witness podium, his forearms steady for the first time in 3 years. Dr. Grant sat in the observer section, giving him an encouraging nod. Behind her sat other humans, including Admiral Jack Morrison, who commanded the Coalition Defense Fleet, and Ambassador Susan Lee, who spoke for Earth's government. The Council will hear testimony regarding humanity's application for membership, announced Speaker Vel Tarn, an ancient Altarian whose tentacles moved like slow water. Zex-High of the former Kethmoran Empire will provide witness testimony. A murmur ran through the chamber. Many species feared the humans, based on battle reports from Echo 7. Others argued that any species capable of such violence should be kept away from civilized worlds. The debate had raged for months. Zex-High, Speaker Vel Tarn continued, "You are the only surviving witness to the Battle of Kepler 442b. Tell us what you observed about human nature during that conflict." Zex-High looked across the chamber at faces from dozens of worlds. Reptilian saurians who breathed through gills. Gas giant. Dwellers who floated in pressure suits. Rock beings from high-gravity worlds whose thoughts moved like mountains. All of them waiting to hear about the humans who had destroyed a Kethmoran fleet. "I was tactical officer aboard the Bone Render," Zex-High began. "We came to Kepler 442b expecting an easy conquest. 800 human civilians against 50,000 Kethmoran warriors. It should have been over in hours. But it was not," Speaker Vel Tarn said. "No, it lasted 3 days. 3 days that changed everything I believed about war, about honor, about what it means to be truly strong." A crystalline delegate in the front row raised a gleaming appendage. "Were the humans more technologically advanced than your reports indicated?" "No. They had mining equipment, hunting rifles, and basic tools. Nothing that should have threatened our ships or our warriors." "Then how did they resist for 3 days?" Zex-High paused, choosing his words carefully. "They fought with something we had never encountered before. Something that made our superior weapons and numbers meaningless." "What was that, love?" The word echoed strangely in the vast chamber. Several delegates leaned forward, their translation devices struggling with the concept. Love was not a military term. It did not appear in tactical manuals or strategic assessments. "Explain," Speaker Vel Tarn said. Captain Amy Rodriguez commanded the human defense. She was a cargo pilot with basic military training. She should have evacuated the colony when our fleet arrived. Instead, she chose to stay and fight. Why? Because the colonists were her family, not by blood, but by choice. She loved them enough to die for them. Zex-High looked directly at the human delegation. Ambassador Lee nodded encouragingly. She understood what he was trying to explain. "The humans did not fight to win," Zex-High continued. "They fought to protect each other. Every choice they made, every sacrifice they accepted, was about keeping their loved ones safe for one more minute, one more hour." Aquatic delegates spoke through water-filled speakers. "But surely this made them weak, emotional, irrational." "No, it made them unstoppable." Zex-High told them about Bobby Chun, the mechanic who turned mining charges into weapons that could pierce Kethmoran armor. About Helen Murphy, the teacher who organized children to carry supplies through combat zones. About Danny Walsh, the engineer who sacrificed his life to disable an entire fleet. Each of them chose to fight, not because they were trained soldiers, but because they had people they could not bear to lose. "And this is why you believe humans should join the coalition?" Speaker Vel Tarn asked. "No, there is more." The chamber fell silent. Zex-High felt the weight of their attention, the importance of the words he was about to speak. "When the battle ended, I was trapped in the wreckage of my ship, dying, helpless. Captain Rodriguez found me there." He paused, feeling the familiar tightness in his chest that came with this memory. She was dying too. Radiation poisoning from the reactor explosion. Burns covering her body. Her people were dead. Her world was destroyed. I was her enemy, part of the force that had killed everything she loved. What did she do? She bandaged my wounds. She gave me water. She sat with me for 6 hours, keeping me alive until the rescue ships arrived. The chamber erupted in surprised voices. Several delegates stood, speaking rapidly in their native languages. The idea of helping an enemy was foreign to many species. She saved your life? Speaker Veltarn asked. She saved more than that. She saved my soul. Zexhai looked up at the painted stars on the ceiling, remembering Captain Rodriguez's face in those final hours. She told me about her daughter, Katie, who was studying to be a doctor on Earth, about her husband, Paul, who died building homes for colonists, about the dreams she had for Echo 7, the families they were trying to raise there. Why did she tell you these things? Because she wanted me to understand that we had not just destroyed buildings and equipment. We had destroyed lives, dreams, hopes. She wanted me to carry that knowledge back to my people. Dr. Grant stood up in the observer section. May I speak? Speaker Veltarn nodded. Dr. Grant, you have treated Zexhai for 3 years. What is your assessment? Zexhai suffers from what humans call moral injury, Dr. Grant said. Not physical trauma, but psychological damage from witnessing acts of extraordinary kindness and sacrifice. He is haunted not by human cruelty, but by human compassion. Explain. Captain Rodriguez showed him that there are things more important than victory, things worth dying for, things worth living for. She challenged everything the Kethmoran Empire believed about strength and weakness, about honor and duty. Zexhai nodded. My nightmares are not about the battle. They are about her final words to me. What did she say? She asked me to tell the galaxy that humans are not perfect. They make mistakes. They feel fear and anger and pain just like everyone else. But when everything is lost, when there is no hope left, they choose to help instead of hurt. They choose to build instead of destroy. They choose to love instead of hate. Speaker Veltarn was quiet for a long moment. And you believe this qualifies them for Coalition membership? I believe this is exactly what the Coalition needs. Zexhai turned to face the human delegation. Other species joined the Coalition, seeking protection, trade benefits, or technological advancement. Humans are applying because they want to help. They want to protect species that cannot protect themselves. They want to build something better for everyone. How can you be certain? Because they are already doing it. Human doctors serve on Coalition medical ships. Human engineers help rebuild worlds damaged by war. Human teachers share knowledge with species that have never seen the stars. Admiral Morrison stood up. If I may, Speaker Veltarn. You may speak, Admiral. 3 months ago, the Zeltan system was attacked by raiders. Their defense fleet was overwhelmed. They sent a distress call to the Coalition. What happened? Human ships arrived first. Captain Sarah Davis of the rescue vessel Unity could have waited for Coalition backup. Instead, she engaged 12 raider ships with a single medical transport. That seems foolish. It was. But she saved 6,000 Zeltan civilians. When asked why she risked her ship and crew, she said, because that is what neighbors do for each other. Zexhai felt pride swell in his chest. That is the human way. They see a galaxy full of neighbors, not strangers or enemies. The debate continued for 2 more hours. Species after species stood to voice concerns about human violence, human unpredictability, human emotion. Each time, Zexhai or Dr. Grant or Admiral Morrison answered with examples of human kindness, human sacrifice, human hope. Finally, Speaker Veltarn called for quiet. The Council will vote. All in favor of accepting humanity's application for Coalition membership? Lights appeared across the chamber as delegates registered their votes. Zexhai held his breath, watching the tally grow. When it was finished, 45 of 47 species had voted yes. The motion passes. Humanity is welcomed into the Galactic Coalition. The chamber erupted in cheers and applause. Zexhai felt tears running down his face, something he had not experienced since childhood. Dr. Grant reached the witness podium first, wrapping him in a human hug that somehow made everything better. Captain Rodriguez would be proud, she whispered in his ear. That night, Zexhai slept peacefully for the first time in 3 years. He dreamed not of fire and death, but of Amy Rodriguez sitting in a garden on Earth, watching children play under alien stars. In the dream, she smiled at him and said, "See? I told you humans and Kethmoran should be friends." When he woke, the nightmare was finally over. The healing could begin.